She emerged in the 70s as a model and actress, with appearances in print, commercials, and on TV. She's been married to a pair of very well-known personalities, first actor George Hamilton and later Rod Stewart. But it was her enduring friendship with Farrah Fawcett that changed her life forever. Her documentary, Farrah's Story, gave viewers an intimate look inside Farrah's valiant battle with cancer and led to her becoming the president of the Farrah Fawcett Foundation. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on InnerVIEWS, our conversation with model, actress, and activist Alana Stewart. Over the years, how has your understanding of love changed?
I think that it's changed a lot. Let's put it that way. Love for me was always, or at least love with a guy was always sort of romantic, passionate, that kind of love. But I think I've learned now that love is more about friendship and closeness and unconditional love. I learned unconditional love when my kids were born.
Right.
When my first son, Ashley Hamilton, was born, I looked at him. That was the first moment I knew what unconditional love was.
As a woman, the journey that you've taken, especially with love, do you find it surprising, the turns and the things that were revealed?
Oh, I think life is amazing. You never know what is going to happen. I would never have guessed where my life would take me. Although I knew when I was growing up in Texas that I wanted something, I didn't know what, but I was always looking at, well, I wanted a Thunderbird convertible when I was 7.
That was the goal.
When I was 7. And we lived out in the country in a little tiny house with an outhouse, an outdoor toilet, okay? And I would see magazines and things. I mean, we didn't have a phone, we didn't have a television, any of that. But I would see things and I would sort of have these dreams of, you know, what life might someday be.
When did you realize you could be a model? I mean, I'm sure a lot of girls think they want to be, but the realization, I could really do this, when did that hit for you?
Well, I was always so tall and skinny, and, you know, the boys used to make fun of me and call me Wilt in high school and everything. So I didn't really think about modeling then. It was when I started reading fashion magazines and, you know, maybe just before I left Texas, and I started thinking, well, gosh, these women are like tall and skinny, and it's a good thing to be tall. You know, I hated it when I was in high school. I was like, I remember the captain of the football team asked me out and I wore flats and I still was taller than he was. It was so embarrassing. I was always taller than all the boys.
And first to New York?
I became a stewardess for Trans-Texas Airlines for about 9 months because it was the only way I could, you know, get out of Texas, and I'd never really been out of Texas. And I was a stewardess for 9 months, and then I saved up enough money to get on a flight and go to New York, and I didn't know a soul. And I don't know how I did it. Frankly, I was 19, and everyone said, no, don't do it. It's dangerous. You know, you'll get killed in the big city. And so I put an ice pick in my purse, and of course it wouldn't get past, you know, today it wouldn't get past security, but then, hey, I just went with my ice pick. So that was my protection.
What was your first impression in New York, walking into that city?
Oh my gosh, and I remember standing on Park Avenue and looking down, and I remember looking up at the Empire State Building and just thinking, oh, this is the most exciting place I've ever been. I mean, I'd seen movies with New York City in it and everything, but it was the most exciting place I'd ever been, and I had no money. I mean, I had hardly any money. I stayed in a hotel that was $7 a night on 7th Avenue, and I looked in the classified ads, and I got a job as a factory model way downtown, and some really junky, like, clothing designer, not a good one, and, you know, it was a factory model. They put, like, clothes on you and fitted clothes on you. And I worked up my courage to go into the Eileen Ford modeling agency. And one day I walked in, and I was sitting there in the reception office, and there was this kind of mean receptionist who kept me waiting a long time and didn't really, I could just tell she kind of looked down her nose at me, and I really looked like a, you know, hayseed. So this very gruff woman came out and looked at me under her glasses and said, why are you keeping this pretty girl waiting? You come with me. And it was Eileen Ford.
Oh, wow.
She sent me to these other women in there that sent me to get my makeup done and started sending me on interviews with photographers to get pictures taken, and then magazines to meet editors and things. And it took a long time though. It wasn't an overnight. I mean, it was months is what I mean. I didn't like walk into New York City and immediately I was on the cover of Vogue or something. Yeah, it was hard work, and I had to go and get all these test shots done with all these photographers and start building a portfolio. And slowly but surely I started to work a little bit, nothing very exciting. And then Eileen sent me to Paris to model there for a few months and kind of learn the ropes and get some experience. And I came back to New York, almost a seasoned pro.
Yeah. How soon after that then does Hollywood play in? I mean, then there were the television commercials probably next, correct?
Well, I think I learned some sense of style in Paris, and watching the other models, and I'd sort of just like take it all in, and I'd go to art museums and I'd look at the paintings and I'd learn about art and artists and things, and I kind of taught myself a lot of things that I hadn't learned in Texas, and I developed a sense of style, I think, dress-wise, and I went back to New York with my own kind of little hip style, and we were wearing mini skirts so short in those days. I mean, like really, they were up to here. I don't know how we weren't arrested, or attacked in the street or something. And I started doing TV commercials and working for Glamour and a lot of the different magazines, and I met who was going to become my first husband, George Hamilton. And I actually had been on a modeling job in Acapulco, and I met him and I sort of said hello politely and turned away, and he thought I was a snotty model, and I thought he was probably a vain actor, and although I was really kind of impressed, but I didn't want to show it, and I was kind of shy, and I had seen him, I think the day before. I remember I was at the beach club and I was walking along, and here comes this Greek god that I had seen in movies, and and he was walking along and he had a bathing suit on and he was all tan and he had a sun reflector under his arm. Gee whiz.
What a surprise.
What a surprise. So we just said hello and were introduced, and then a few months later I was in New York and I was out at a club with a date, and he was there. And we said hello again, and the next night I was out again, and I saw him again, and we said hello again. And the next day I flew to Los Angeles to do a commercial, and I was out with some friends that night, and I ran into him again. So it's really interesting. In fact, it's a funny story. I felt someone pinch me on the butt, and I turned around, and it was George. And he was like smiling and, said, gosh, we must be meant to be.
Now, I mean no disrespect by this question, but from the stories you hear, the two of you, so wonderful together. The chemistry still there all these years later. Why didn't it work out for you two?
I think it was because we were both so young. I mean, he was definitely the love of my life. I met George and I fell madly in love with him the minute I met him, and I just knew that he was it for me, and all I wanted to do was marry George. He had no intention of getting married, and he told me that from the very beginning. He said, my mother was married 4 or 5 times, and he said, I just don't believe in marriage, and I'm never going to get married. And my mother had been married 4 times too, so I understood what he meant, but I just thought, oh yeah, right. With not any kind of ego or anything. It was just like, I thought, but of course, if we're in love, we're going to get married. That's just what I'd been taught, So we lived together 4 years, and then eventually we got married.
Right.
He gave in. He succumbed. And we had our son, Ashley Hamilton. And we were together a few more years. And I think that, I hadn't really sown my wild oats. I mean, I met George when I was very young and wasn't terribly experienced in the world of dating. And I think that I think we grew apart. I think I thought there was something maybe exciting out there that I had missed, and he just wanted to stay home and be with a wife and a child. He'd done the whole Hollywood scene, you know, and I hadn't really. And I think we just grew in a different direction. But I always loved him, and he always loved me. And when we split up, I really kind of thought it was going to be temporary. You know, I thought we would just have some space and that we would get back together.
Yeah.
And we kind of dated off and on during that period. And there was about a 2-year span. And he went out with some girls, and I went out with some guys, but nobody that we were really serious about. And I did a few movies, and I did a movie with George, and George and I did some theater together. And then I continued working and doing some acting, and I ended up meeting my second husband.
And I love both of your husbands. They are so different people.
I know. Could you ever imagine what I would, how I could be with George Hamilton and then Rod Stewart?
Right. I mean, very
so
different people.
Very different. Very, very different.
Are there similarities that we just don't see in them?
None.
None?
Nope, not any.
You've kept a really wonderful relationship with George Hamilton. You and Rod Stewart, same, similar?
Not the same, no. I mean, Rod and I have 2 children together, Kimberly and Sean. We were together about 6 years, and we've never developed really that closeness that George and I just had. It's why I always say George was kind of, you know, the love of my life. And Rod and I never had that closeness. You know, when we broke up, there was a lot of certainly anger on my part at the time, and I think it just took a while. It took a while to get over that. Yeah. We had a lot of differences and ideas about raising children and things, and my ideas were very different from his. And again, we have a civil relationship, and I can't say that we're close friends, but you know, my kids obviously adore their father, you know, and he loves his kids, and that's the most important thing to me. It always was, you know, even when we broke up, was just that he and the kids have a good relationship.
Is it hard to be with folks that are so recognizable?
It is, because I felt like I had my own career from the time I was really, really young, and I worked and I supported myself from a very young age. And once I was married, I think my marriage has kind of overshadowed anything I did career-wise. Mm-hmm. And so I carried that a long time with me, you know, and I used to really resent it, you know, and I would say, don't introduce me. If I did a show or something, I'd say, don't introduce me as George Hamilton's ex-wife and Rod Stewart's ex-wife, because that would really like irk me. You know, I have a life. I'm a person. I'm not just someone's ex-wife. And I don't really have that issue anymore. You know, it's interesting. People still talk about it, like we're talking about it now, and want to know about it, and that's all fine. You know, it's part of my life. Yeah. And I'm happy that it was part of my life. I have 3 incredible children, and one very, very, very close friend in George, and a friend in Rod. You know, but I've done a lot of other things in my life besides just be married to 2 very famous men. You know, what can I say? I just, you know, I was attracted to them, you know, and I guess I must have had something that attracted them to me. And, you know, I guess I could have been attracted to a more kind of down-to-earth, stable kind of guy, which I would be today, by the way. I wouldn't be interested, I don't think, today in being with an actor or a rock star. In fact, I know I wouldn't. Yeah. You know, I've definitely changed. And my idea of love has changed, which is what we first started talking about.
And that leads me right to the next place. How did you meet Farrah?
Farrah and I met first when we were doing commercials, and we had both just moved from Texas to Los Angeles, and we'd run into each other on all these commercial auditions, and I just thought she was gorgeous, and we'd be up for a lot of the same commercials, interestingly enough, but we didn't really become good friends then. We just knew who each other was, and we'd say hi and how are you. And about 10 years later, after we first met, and she'd gone on to do Charlie's Angels and the famous red bathing suit and all of that, and I was married to Rod and pregnant with my daughter Kimberly, and she was going with Ryan O'Neal. I think they'd been going together maybe less than a year, and we met at a dinner party. We all sat together, the four of us, and we just hit it off. You know, it was that Texas thing. You know, Farrah was like having a girlfriend from high school days. You know, she, like the girls that you sat around with your rollers in your hair, and you went to the shopping mall and, you know, did that kind of stuff, went to the drive-in and got a Coke and, you know, a hamburger.
I think people find it very hard to believe that the two of you would be like those kind of girls. We see you two as such glamorous women.
Well, the thing that I always loved about her, and I think one of the reasons we connected, is because underneath it all, we were both just very kind of down-home Texas girls, you know, kind of no BS and straightforward. And, you know, she loved her family. She loved her, you know, Ryan and Redmond, and she loved her mom and her dad who lived here in Texas, and she came back here all the time. And she was just like sitting around with one of my girlfriends I went to high school with, you know, and I think I was the same for her. And she had the whole Hollywood thing, you know, the glamour part where she'd have to show up at, you know, premieres or screenings or whatever. And, you know, and I had somewhat, not anything close to what she had, but I mean, I did have a glamorous lifestyle. But we used to go down to Ryan's house at the beach, just the two of us. He'd stay in town and watch the kids. And we'd go down there and we'd just, you know, do our nails and look at fashion magazines and not wear makeup and just kind of hang out like girlfriends.
Yeah. When the word cancer first came into your friendship, what was the thought? What was the fear at that point?
You know, I was in Germany at a clinic with my son, and my daughter actually was there as well. And George was there, and there were quite a few of us there. And George had originally sent me there for chronic fatigue syndrome because I had had it for a long time. And he had said, you know, I want you to go to this clinic and don't be freaked out because most of the patients there are cancer patients. And so I went there and I met all these people who were cancer patients, and I had always been so scared of the word cancer, and I was scared to go to this clinic and be around all these people with cancer. And I met them, and they were so incredibly courageous. And, you know, I'd sit there and talk to them, and they'd have the IVs in their arm, getting chemo or whatever. And I got to know them, and a lot of them were getting better. You know, they'd been given, you know, 2 or 3 months to live at different cancer treatment centers, and they'd come to this place in Germany, and 2 years later they were still thriving. And so I was very impressed by what they were doing there and by these people and their courage and their strength. And so I had gone back there. I had taken my son there for some treatment, and my daughter came in to me and she said, Mom, does Farrah have cancer? And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, what's on the internet? I said, oh, that's ridiculous. Of course not. It's just that crazy stuff. You know, it's something with one of those tabloids, which was the bane of her existence, you know. And still, I thought, well, I'm going to call her. So I called her in L.A., and I asked to speak to her, and she was a long time coming to the phone, and I just started to have this eerie feeling, you know, and I said, Kimberly just told me that something was on the internet. Is it true? And she started to cry, and she said yes. And it was just like the biggest shock in the world to me. I couldn't believe it. Not Farrah.
Yeah.
She was like, you know, strong and athletic and full of health and, you know, seemingly indestructible. And she started treatment at UCLA, and she did traditional treatment. And then when the cancer came back, she asked me about the clinic in Germany. And a few days later, she talked to the doctors. She and Ryan talked it over. And a few days later, we were at the clinic in Germany. She had decided to go there and see if they could help her.
How soon did you folks decide you were going into battle mode? Because when you see the documentary, when you hear about it, you guys all decide you were going to fight and fight strong.
Well, I think she decided right away after the initial shock hit her, you know, and then she was declared cancer-free 3 months later, and then 3 months after that, it had returned with a vengeance. And I know she was scared, obviously, but she had more courage and determination than anybody I've ever known. And we just sort of, she said, well, will you stay with me at the clinic in Germany as long as I have to be there? I may have to be there a few weeks. And I said, I'll stay as long as you're there. And that started it. I just made up my mind that I was going to be there. And you know, I was a little bit familiar with Germany and the clinic and kind of their way of doing things. And she handed me her little handheld camera before we went in for the first doctor's meeting. And she said, would you film this? Because I want to be able to remember what the doctor says. So I sat there and I, first of all, didn't know how to film. And she showed me. And I filmed her and Ryan and the doctor, and we started filming everything, and the procedures, the surgeries. I mean, they would let me film. I'd be there in one of those lead vests in a room where she was having some procedure, you know, filming. And there were times when I would say, you know, I'd have the camera off because it just seemed invasive. It seemed too personal, or she'd be in pain, and she'd go, no, just go ahead and film it. This is what cancer is. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it wasn't meant to be a documentary. It was just meant to be her personal film. She didn't know what she was going to do with it. And then about a year later, maybe a year after we started filming, she got all these calls from networks, and NBC called and some other networks, and she made a deal with NBC to show it as a documentary. And the reason she did that was because she'd gotten so many thousands and thousands of letters from people just saying, you know, you are so brave. Your courage has given me the courage to keep fighting. And she kind of felt by maybe sharing her battle that she would be able to help other people. And the other part of it is, at the time, she was in a kind of remission. She was doing well at the time she made that decision. Right. And we thought this was going to be a documentary. Once we knew it was going to be a documentary, we thought it was going to be a documentary about her getting well, her beating cancer. That's what it was supposed to be about. And encouraging people to think out of the box and seek outside treatment, and don't just take what your doctor has to say as a death sentence, you know, seek other opinions. It was just all of those things, you know. But life took a different turn, and it turned into a very different documentary. I mean, a very different ending, but she wanted to keep filming. That was an amazing journey, you know. It changed my life, my life forever. It made me see what's really precious and in life, and it really helped me get my priorities straight, you know. And I just think we have to live every day to the fullest, and we have to be grateful that for every day that we're alive, and we have to, all the people that we love and care about, we have to show it to them, and we have to really appreciate them and spend time with them and be there, because life can change in a heartbeat, you know. In a second it changes. I saw it change, you know, and you never know when that's going to happen. So you have to live every day to the fullest and love every day to the fullest.
How do you view now traditional medicine after going through this whole ordeal?
You know, I think that traditional chemo and radiation definitely has its place, but I think medicine is moving so quickly, and now that I'm president of her foundation, the Farrah Fawcett Foundation, I spent the last year and a half or 2 years really doing so much research, meeting with so many doctors, that it just blows me away what's going on in the field of cancer research. And I think that, you know, one of these days, not too far from now, there is going to be a cure. I feel so hopeful about it. And the doctors in Germany were using some treatments that they don't have in this country yet. Some are in trials here, some are being used here. There were some medications and things that were, you know, their version of the FDA had passed certain medicines before they were passed here. So there were some things that she was being treated with that they weren't using here yet. So I do believe that those treatments helped her. You know, when her cancer came back, she had 9 tumors in her liver. It had metastasized to her liver, and that's pretty serious.
Yeah.
I mean, that was stage 4 cancer, and they don't give you a long time to live. She lived for 2 more years, and the doctors were just hoping they could just keep her alive and strong enough until another thing came out, another cure, another new approach, you know, and it didn't happen that way, unfortunately.
Well, now, how about for you? Where are you going now? You're doing some acting again?
Well, yeah, I've kind of gotten back into it again. It's so interesting that the film that I did is debuting in Houston.
Yeah, back in your home.
I know, back in my hometown, and tonight at WorldFest, actually. And on top of it, I'm nominated for Best Supporting Actress.
Well, welcome back to the fold.
I mean, you know, I guess it's never too late, right? You know.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Alana Stewart.
To order a DVD of this or any episode of Interviews, please visit HoustonPBS.org.